It's freezing in Melbourne at the moment, and unlike, it doesn't snow here in Australia, so we're kind of unequipped to deal with the cold. We're kind of like England and the heat. So it's like 10 degrees and I'm like in this ridiculously puffy jacket that's like made for the snow. So yeah, but it's well and truly winter in Melbourne. It's so cold. Anyway, I had a monster of a reading week. I was just a reading fiend. Actually, I didn't read that much. I listened a bunch. I was listening like to a bunch of audiobooks. Anyway, I finished Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed, which is this odd book that's not, it's kind of self-help, it's kind of advice, you know, it's from an advice column, but it's also part memoir because she shares so many of her own stories, and it's also kind of essay, it's like in an essay form, and it's really unique and extremely good. I gave it 5 stars. It's fantastic. And after listening to like huge gulps of it at once, you just kind of want to keep going and going with this book. It's fantastic. So well written. I understand the sort of obsessive love around Cheryl Strayed now. I sort of thought, you know, I witnessed it because, you know, I'm on book websites and things, and I didn't quite understand it until I read this book. It's fantastic. I noticed after reading the entire book that there's sort of 2 main types of questions, or types of answers really, or types of problems, I guess. One revolved all around love, and not just romantic love, but love between friends, love between parents and children, and love and different topics like love and vulnerability, love and forgiveness. Forgiveness was a big theme in this novel, which really stood out to me because I'm not that great at it. But yeah, love, I mean, I love, and so obviously I could relate to these questions, but what really moved me was the other type of questions that were about things that you couldn't control, you know, things like grief, things like abuse, you know, things that were affecting your life but that you couldn't change, you know, and pretty much the message of the novel was that it is your responsibility to live within those limits. It is your responsibility to have as happy a life as you can, to work within those limits that you have. And that was just so powerful, and it was exactly what I needed to hear, because I don't know, I'm sure I've mentioned it on this channel. I have a chronic illness called fibromyalgia, and it affects every aspect of my life. Like, I am disabled. I am a disabled person, even though it's an invisible illness, so I look quote unquote normal, but I'm disabled. And so working within those limits, it was a powerful message for me. And even the things that don't necessarily directly relate to chronic illness, I mean, I don't think there wasn't a single question about chronic illness, but there were lots of questions about things that they couldn't control, that they couldn't change, limits that were put upon them that they had no control over. And having no control is something that we all struggle to deal with, I think, because we're all born, and we're born into certain limits, whether it be, you know, poverty. There was this story of this girl, when Cheryl Strayed was working with teen girls, and for them, success was getting and holding down a casual job at Taco Bell. Like, that was success for them, and it was. And she didn't say it in a condescending way. She didn't say it in a belittling way. For them, it is massive because of what they were born into. And just hearing stories and hearing the way Cheryl Strayed writes those stories, she can name very specific emotions, or very specific types of emotion that you can't really name, and yet she puts words onto them, or an analogy onto them, or something that is just perfect. And so yeah, it's a pretty short book, but it has its impact. and I definitely recommend it. I gave it 5 stars. Yeah, so that's one book that I finished. I also read Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari. This is a really recent release. I think this is it was released last week, I think, or maybe the week before. It was released this month, and I've never read a book that quickly before. This book is not a memoir. I thought it was a memoir, but it's not. It's about, it's called Modern Romance, and it's about the ways, trends in how we romance nowadays. So things like texting and Tinder and, you know, online communication and Facebook and finding new people. Online dating is a huge topic, and how that differs from, you know, our parents and our parents' parents. To be honest, the first half of this book was really boring. It was really kind of duh, you know? I mean, I'm a 20-year-old with a smartphone. Like, most of what he was saying was not that interesting. I already knew about online dating. I already knew about Tinder. I already knew about, like, texting etiquette or texting games. Like, you know, when you're like, oh, well, this person took, you know, a day to reply. I'm going to take 2 days to reply. So, sort of mind games like that. I already knew about that, because if you're texting, those impulses to play those games just arise naturally. So the first half of the book was kind of boring, I'm not gonna lie. But then the second half of the book was a lot more interesting, because Aziz Ansari and the researcher dude that he had went out of America, and they went to different places around the globe. They went to Tokyo, they went to Buenos Aires, and they went to Paris. And hearing about those cultures, not just comparing them to America, but comparing them to each other, was really, really fascinating, because it was unfamiliar to me, you know, hearing about the romantic trends that are happening within the youth there, and also things that are just part of the culture. You know, in France, it's much more accepted that cheating happens. You know, it's not a happy thing, but it's accepted that it's going to happen at some point. And in Tokyo, there's quite a lot of, I don't know how to describe it. There's herbivore men, which just sounds weird. It makes sense in the context of the book, and they explain what herbivore men mean, but let's just say that they're very timid, and lots of the youth in Tokyo are not that interested in sex or relationships. And then you jump to Buenos Aires, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, I'm sorry, where, like, sex is just everywhere, and, like, it flows freely, and it's, you know, whatever, but it results in a lot of street harassment for women, which is not great. So yeah, the second half of the book is where I found it most interesting, and where I was like, okay, yeah, this is actually quite compelling. The delivery is nice. I listened to the audiobook, and it was read by Aziz Ansari himself. I really liked that, because he's not an audiobook reader, so he would sometimes slur his words, because most people don't have perfect articulation. And he would also, you know, put on certain accents, and he would also have little sidebars in the audiobook where he would just talk to audiobook listeners, and it was good. It was a nice delivery, and it had a more conversational pace. Like, lots of audiobooks talk quite slowly, but he's not an audiobook reader, so he was just blah 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 blah. So it was good. It wasn't as funny as I thought it was going to be perfectly honest. It had, I think, a lot of the humour came from his delivery. I don't think a lot of the jokes would have worked as well for me in text alone. So yeah, I ended up giving it 3 stars because I did enjoy it, but it wasn't, you know, mind-blowing by any means. Next I read a short story, a fairly famous short story. It's The Necklace by Guy de Maupassant, some French guy, I'm sorry. I'll write it in the description. I wouldn't know how to pronounce it anyway. Yeah, I feel odd, sort of, I don't feel like I could describe the plot to this short story, because if I did, I would just tell you the entire short story. Let's just say it was an average short story. It kind of felt like a moral of the story for adults, you know, like you would read a bedtime story to your kids. It felt like that, except for adults. It was very odd. didn't mind the writing, I didn't mind the writing itself, but the story itself was just very, like, basic. My computer is dying. Technical difficulties, I'm sorry. There we go. Yeah, so that's what I finished this week. Now I'll get to what I'm currently reading. I'm still currently reading 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel, Garcia, Marquez. Sorry, I got the snuffles because it's so cold. Anyway, I actually took a huge break from this book. I took like a week off and I was just like, I can't read it. It's just too much. It is a very, like, heavy book, and you kind of just, it's hard to hold in your mind all at one time, and you kind of just have to relinquish control and just go with the flow, because the words themselves are not that difficult to understand, but it's just the way it moves is intense, I think. So I'm a little over halfway, but I've gotten back into it in the past couple of days, and I am hoping to finish it sometime this year. Even if I just take all the time in the world, I know I will finish this book because I am loving it, and it's one of the few books I would call, like, a masterpiece. I can't imagine how someone wrote this. And I know I'm gonna give it 5 stars no matter what happens. It's kind of like Jane Eyre in that way. I read it and I was just like, I can't not give this 5 stars. Like, I can't not. So even though I haven't finished it, I already know most of what I think about it. I just have to finish it. Which will happen at some point. I'm also reading, I felt like a really short book in conjunction with 100 Years, so I started reading Black Beauty by Anna Sewell? Sewell. Anna Sewell. I don't know. Names are hard. And this is the oldest book on my shelf, not just in terms of, like, the book itself, but also the book that's been on, like, my mental TBR list for the longest. Because this was my mum's copy as a child, and, like, you have, like, she's, like, drawn, she's, like, coloured in on things in the pages, and it's adorable. So I'm not actually reading this copy because it's kind of falling apart, and I'm scared of breaking it. So I'm listening to, again, I'm totally on an audio kick at the moment. I'm listening to, or the LibriVox recording, because the story is in the public domain, so, and I really like the LibriVox recording. Some of them, because they're recorded by just, like, normal people, they, you know, sometimes the LibriVox can be hit or miss, but this one's really, really great. In terms of the story, what can I say about Black Beauty? It's really heavy-handed. It's very much like, it has a goal. It's trying to teach people about treating horses nicely and also treating other humans nicely. Like, every chapter has, like, and the chapters are really short. The chapters are, like, a couple pages long. Every chapter has, like, a moral of the story where it's like, be a good person. Don't be a dick to horses or people. It's just very obvious. And I mean, it is a kid's book, so that's okay. But it's just kind of like, I'm not a kid. I'm an adult, right? So, yeah, it's sort of, it is, however, very effective and very emotive. Like, I have buckets of sympathy for this horse. I'm like, shit, dude, that's a rough ride, you know? And it was actually, I looked it up, it was actually a really effective novel. It created change, not just for horse treatment. Like, she changed laws with this novel, which is awesome. So it had a goal, and it succeeded. She changed laws not just with horse treatment, but also with cabbies, and, like, because the Black Beauty becomes a cab horse in Victorian England. So yeah, it's definitely an effective, emotive novel. It's just not, like, that relevant to today. I mean, I guess, you know, being a good person is always relevant. But yeah, so it's good but not great is what I'm saying. So I'll probably finish this maybe today or tomorrow. It's very short. Yes, so that's what I've been reading. Let me know what you have been reading. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.